Well, she is the one that gives roll call, isn't that correct? So, I think we're back to where to go. Back to the go.
Sheldon, are you gonna come to the budget meeting? Why? Couldn't get hold of him.
I think she's on the phone with him, I thought.
She got a hold, called the house, but he's not there.
He's not home, he went fishing.
You went fishing?
He was not told to be here.
He wasn't told apparently.
So, he's
Well,
Is it my responsibility to get a hold of staff and tell them?
no.
No, I wanted Dave Griffin to be here, and he had already, the new superintendent, but he already had an engagement, shall we say. So I asked him to have Sheldon here in his place, and I don't know what happened.
We'll see.
Maybe we'll find out now. Is the meeting called to order?
Hello?
It is, okay.
So
Wait
we
for
can do a roll
George
call.
to take this call and then.
Should we table these funds till next
Well,
week?
see what he brings up first.
Oh, yeah. Probably future them.
Okay, Mary Ann, could you do roll call, please?
Sure. Budget committee member Haight?
Here.
Gaida, I'm sorry. Gaida. Budget
We can
committee,
start it,
Solinger?
Here.
Budget committee member Fisher?
Here.
Budget committee Kremlin?
Here.
Budget committee Shauna Hazel?
Here.
Budget committee Kevin Benson?
Here.
Budget committee Sandra Kelly?
Here.
Budget committee Tiffany Pruitt?
Here.
Budget committee Don Haight?
Here.
Budget committee, George Fisher?
Here.
Budget committee Karen Syed?
Sheldon?
She's been excused.
Budget committee Bobby Walker?
Budget committee
He's been
meeting that We're
excused.
supposed to be at tonight?
Even.
Oh, budget
And-
committee Evie
Oh, really?
Zerfing?
And she's also been
Dave forgot to
excused.
tell you.
Budget committee Lance Masters?
He has not called in.
All right.
Okay, so has everybody had a chance to read the minutes?
It's starting right now. Yeah.
Oh, could we
All right.
please stand and pledge the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now, has everybody had a chance to read the minutes?
Yes.
Are there any corrections to, first we'll deal with April 27th. Are there any corrections to the April 27th, Tiffany?
On page 2, I think there's just a typo. 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth sentence down. It's budget committee.
Yeah.
Oh, committee? Okay, thank you.
That's close enough.
Anybody else on the minutes of April 27th? Could I have a motion to accept the minutes of April 27th?
I make a motion to accept the minutes from budget committee meeting, April 27th, 2011.
I second that.
There's been a motion to approve the budget committee minutes from April 27th, 2011, and we have a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Those are accepted and approved. Do I have to sign those, or Mary Ann? And now we're going to deal with the minutes for the budget committee meeting, May 4th, 2011. Are there any corrections to these minutes?
Yes.
Who said that? Laura.
Okay, there's a couple places, this is page 3 at the top. And
Do you know if that's what actually happened? Because these are,
I'm sure it was me.
okay, and so, are there any corrections to these minutes? I have one, and that would be on the second to the last paragraph of page number 2. I'm not included in that, in the vote, and I voted yes on that issue. Somehow I got left out. And let me see, I think there was one other, my only other issue was that the continuance of the meeting was continued until May 19th, 2010. So that should be changed as well.
That's correct.
Darlene?
I can't find the page, but it was where Kevin had questioned, Fund 5 being not in compliance and how we were going to bring that into compliance, bring it to zero balance. And it said that I just said that it was not compliant, but actually I said it is not compliant, and as long as we work toward bringing it into compliance, I think that's enough, but we don't want to take another dime from any other fund to bring that department back to
Does
zero.
anybody see where those, where that's in the, because I remember it that way as well, but I don't, I'm trying to find it here so we can make the correction.
I hope it wasn't in the first step.
It was in April 27th, is when we discussed it.
Uh-oh, we already approved it. Do you want to,
It was in there. I thought it was.
it was in, on the April 27th set?
No, it just quoted me saying that the fund was not compliant.
Okay.
And what I said was, is if we were showing that we were trying to make that fund compliant, working toward compliancy, that, and not to take another dime from other funds to bring it to zero.
Okay, and are there any other corrections of the May 4th, suggested corrections? Laura?
If this is a correction, you tell me. On page 5, we were talking about the $450,000 on the revenue page, and you guys also the consensus. And I voted no on that. It just says that there was a majority vote yes. But then down here, they put in BCM site opposed. So I was just wondering for consistency of reporting, as far as format, why wouldn't it have been recorded that?
I do think that that correction should be made. That's my opinion, if she voted no.
Where would that be on page 5?
It would be the majority.
It's right in the middle of that page, right
in the middle?
of that second
Yeah.
paragraph there.
The middle of the
Before
second?
Vincent,
Majority
took a
committee
poll.
recommended to leave it
Page 5.
at the 450. And you,
Voted no.
okay, so we need to.
The majority of the committee recommended to leave it at 450, and it doesn't say who was opposed. If we could just put in there that Laura Fisher,
I was opposed.
because
That's not based on Oregon law.
it says, right before it says BBC Kelly came back in and said that her vote would have been no. Because Laura did vote no. I reviewed that tape also. And so with those 3 corrections, if I can remember correctly, are there any more? The correction of myself being included in the vote, that's at the bottom of page 2. The change on page 5, including Laura's no vote, and the change of the date. Laura, did you have something else?
I did have something else. On page 6, at the top of the page, and it's when, Darlene, BCM Solinger is discussing that when we sell the fire hall, that we'd have to, there may be a contingency where we would owe the fire department, and I thought she said $70,000 at the time. Was that?
I did.
Okay, so.
No, it wasn't, it was from, forestry, back to the forestry.
The payment due to forestry, and I thought you said something about, was it 70,000, so I just didn't know if that should be in there, or was that the same thing?
I did
or-
say that.
It's for over the
Say
park.
the fire hall, isn't there a payment due due to the forestry department. Would you like that to say a $70,000, or is it sufficient just to say a payment? Okay. So with the three changes that I have gone through, could I have a motion to accept the minutes with those changes? Anybody?
May I ask a
Mary Ann?
question?
Yes.
On, Laura, on page 3, you had said that you had opposed. Did you want us to go back and listen to the tape on that?
She did oppose, I've already
I can see
listened.
that, I'm sure I did it, I just
Oh.
think I'm putting it out there that my bad, I did not.
Okay,
make the
then
decision.
you're okay with that?
Yeah, it's my first time changing the logo, I'm good.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Now, is there a motion to accept the minutes from May 4th with those three changes?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
Second?
There's been a motion and a second to accept the Budget Committee minutes for May 4th, 2011, with the three changes that I already spoke of. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That's all accepted as well. Now, there were a few things that came to mind in the minutes that I'd like to follow up on, that the minutes of May 4th reflect that that there was transferred money. It would be reflected at the bottom of page 4, Mary Ann, in the minutes of May 4th. And F.O. Bump said, as far as emergency, she was going to provide information at the next meeting. And so I was wondering if that information was available. I think that at the end of the meeting, we should probably go back and review what information we've requested. And so it's clear to staff, because a lot of conversation goes on. And also, when I read the minutes of the 27th, there were a lot of instances where the person who did the minutes had a difficult time because we were talking over each other, and she had difficulty figuring out who was speaking because we were talking without me having recognized them. And one other thing that I had called to my attention that I certainly agree with is when there's a hot issue and everybody's hands go flying up. It's very distracting, both to me to try to listen to the speaker and to the rest of the people, and to the speaker themselves, seeing those hands like this. So I'd really appreciate it if you waited to raise your hands until the speaker was done. And then I'll go counterclockwise around the room and make sure everybody has an opportunity to talk. And so there won't be as much danger of mine missing a hand or not knowing which one flew up first. And if everybody would agree to that, I'd really appreciate it. And so the first thing that I think that we need to talk about is a newly developed situation. And it's that we picked the street fund, water fund, sewer fund, and tourism fund if we had time, which we obviously will have time. And we don't have representation from these funds. And it would seem to me that we need to have somebody here to ask questions and to represent their budget. And the city administrator doesn't feel that he can do so. What is the will of the committee? Does anybody have a suggestion? Should we move this? Should we start to discuss the parts we can discuss and then table the rest? Or should we just simply do it when it can be presented and then we can discuss it thoroughly? Yeah, Rich?
Well, I think just like we did last week, I mean, we can go through the individual funds and the line items, and we'll take down any questions that come up. And the next meeting, I'll have the new Public Works Superintendent and Sheldon both here to answer them.
I kind of have a problem with that because I think the representative of that budget should be allowed to present it before we delve into it. That basically is what I think. But any other comments?
I did someplace here, provided you a copy of the Public Works Superintendent's comments to the council, or actually his written comments to the council, in terms of what he sees is problematic and some things that need to be dealt with. Again, if you want to put that off, that's
Well,
fine.
I think that would be up to the committee. Does anybody else have an opinion? Darlene?
I think we should wait till we have representation from Public Works.
To present their budget in the,
We're gonna have to do it twice, we may forget things, questions may come up. During discussion, more questions will come up when the department heads are here. I think we could do it once, then doing it twice.
Gaida?
Well, in regards to the tourism fund, I can give information on that if you want to hear it.
Is Donna going to be here?
She will, but she has another meeting and should be here, well, she was, with.
Well, we have other things we can talk
figured
about.
it would be a
We'll
little
wait
later,
for
so.
her.
Okay, because she will be here.
Laura?
You can tell me if this question is okay to ask or not, I don't know.
Any questions okay to ask?
Okay, so what I'm curious is this is the Public Works Department, and they do the streets, is that the same like the street fund?
Mhm.
Are they the same funds that loan money to the EMS? Did these funds?
Street
loan-
funds did not.
So they're just so far behind due to what? They don't get any money or?
They don't get any revenue. The only revenue that the street receives is the state gasoline portion from the state.
And our taxes, they don't get a part of our taxes, that department? No?
No, the income is the revenue from the gasoline, street lighting revenue, and that's pretty much the revenue they get.
Is there
There's
a
no-
reason that they don't get a percentage of our taxes to keep our streets up? or
Well, they
is that
used to get, if I'm not mistaken, revenues from lumber.
Timber tax, but that has since
Disappeared.
ceased,
Right.
or gone, yeah.
So it used to be better funded than it is now. Would be, that would be basically a city council decision, I think. I'm not sure about that, whether to appropriate more funds, but they haven't asked for it in this budget, so they've asked for the amount that they are receiving in revenues. Gaida, did you have a comment? Darlene?
I was reading, I think it was the Hood River County Commissioners meeting, and they were discussing the lift ticket tax along with the food and beverage tax. And the thought was there that the funds would go to search and rescue costs and road maintenance. So if that goes through, I don't know if that would affect this budget, if we would get a portion of that here to help our street fund too.
I would assume that that would be county revenues that go to county roads, not to city roads. Right, we're responsible for our own roads inside the city limits. Yeah, except for forest, forest land.
So that's not very good.
George?
Anyway, Sandra, to get back on track, I think that we should, or I make a motion that we delay going through the Public Works until we have a Public Works
I
representative.
second that motion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we're going to put that at the front of our next meeting, and hopefully we can have some representation from that department, those departments at that time. I'm sure there was a misunderstanding, and I don't think anybody would miss our wonderful budget meeting just to go fishing. It's a big choice. So, that is postponed. And so, the next thing on the agenda is the discussion on loans. Rich, could you lead that off, please?
Actually, I wanted to ask if I could have an item added to the agenda, which is just a follow-up from staff.
Yes.
I think at every meeting, we should probably have that.
Okay, certainly.
Okay. Some of the things we talked about, one was, Kevin asked about the transit room tax and whether it went straight into the tourism fund or the general fund. I pulled up the ORS on it, and quite frankly, it doesn't say. So I'm gonna have to contact, I've got a copy of it here if you want to see it. Actually, here, pass it over to
He
him.
said that,
So,
Kevin didn't understand what you said.
okay, I think you asked about whether the transit room tax money that we collect would go straight into a tourism fund or straight into the general fund. Right now, it goes straight into the general fund. No?
We split it at the time we received the TRT tax, 70/30. It doesn't go directly into
So it doesn't go, well,
We split it when we get it.
okay,
30% goes into tourism, 70 into general.
okay,
That way, they get their portion right when we get the revenues.
okay.
So it doesn't go
So-
into either right away.
So if you get $90, 30 goes here, and
And we made a recommendation to switch that and have it go into tourism, and then they feed the general fund. And it was my understanding from Kevin that that was legally required.
Yeah, and that's what I tried to find. In the transit room tax, in the ORS, it doesn't say one way or the other. So I have a call into the Department of Revenue to ask that question, if you can do that. So, anyway, I'm just waiting for an answer back on that.
Well, you know, and this is something that I'd really like to ask the tourism chairperson when she gets here, because she keeps very close track of her money. And she didn't feel that they were getting anything other than the original estimate. They always...
That's not true. If I get, like I said, when I get the money, doesn't matter how much, it automatically gets dispersed. So if we get 10,000 more a year, it is dispersed into the proper funds. I don't take any extras.
Do you tell them when they have more money in their fund?
They see a financial every month to show them how much revenue they
Okay.
have.
I think we should hold off this conversation and have it when Donna gets here, because there seems to be some confusion here, what happens to 100% of the money. And I happen to notice in this budget that the revenues are, although I think it's good to be conservative and not overestimate revenues, I don't think that revenues should be underestimated either. And it's proven there's a track record of higher revenues than is being estimated. So that's what brought the question to mind originally. Okay, now, is there anything else, Rich? Any other points?
There's a letter in here that I sent to DOR. I think in the meantime, Darlene has talked to them, so she might want to relate her discussions.
I also left you a message that I had had an hour-long conversation with the...
So did she.
We both have.
And then I also made both of us made inquiries regarding the cemetery fund and how that's supposed to be structured, so I don't have an answer on that one either.
We
You
emailed
do?
it back and we're waiting
Yeah, right.
for an answer.
I think that's it. That's all I have for now.
Everybody got their letters from the Department of Revenue, saw the question that was asked and the answer that was given. And according to them, that, you know, we really can't determine for what length of time we're going to budget these things. That's a city council decision, and that must be done by resolution. In order to refinance this for any term more than the 5 years that we already have a resolution for, would require the city council to make a new resolution and set up a new payment plan. And it's what the letter says, is you can have up to 10 years if you do this. And to me, it's a little bit tricky business how you borrow. Instead of borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, you're borrowing from Peter to pay Peter in order to refinance this. But that can be done according to the Department of Revenue, but in order to do that and have us service those payments, it has to be determined by city council. It has to have a legal resolution to refinance this amount for a given amount of time. The budget committee can't do that. We only have a resolution that says it's for 5 years.
And it has to be done by June 30th.
Right, and And so the city council has the ability to make a new resolution and set up a new payment schedule. Otherwise, you know, I guess the budget committee can, you know, determine an amount. I really think that it would be difficult, but I guess we could make a principal payment the same way we made a principal payment to our sewer fund. But that's really not the way it should be done. It should be done with a resolution and a new payment schedule set up. And the good news about that is it can be done in one meeting. And so that can all be done so we could handle it at the budget meeting after that. Because right now, we can't determine what the payments on a $450,000 loan would be, because the budget committee does not know for what length of time the council will choose to finance that.
And also interest.
And plus interest.
Well-
Don?
How does it affect the loan with the sewer department then? Is that'll be a separate?
They'll have
No.
to all be separate resolutions.
I talked to Darlene a little after she spoke to him. I don't completely understand if this can be done through the electric department yet. I'm still very skeptical that we can, what would happen
Okay, now I'll
if we
tell
get in a
you,
problem?
I didn't think it should be done from the electric department to begin with. And it's what happened on that is the city obtained a legal opinion from our lawyer which says we could do that through the electric department. And so it was done through the electric department. Now, as far as the Department of Revenue goes, and Darlene can bear me out on this because we've talked to different people at different times and got exactly the same answers, is they have no, municipal utilities does not appear in the ORSs concerning, that is not their purview, whether it's a municipal utility or not. There are circumstances which could restrict the use of that money that aren't in the budget. That's not what the Department of Revenue does. They handle budget issues, and to them there is no difference between, it does say there, except for restricted uses. So that brings it down to, is it a restricted use or is it not a restricted use? And our lawyer determined that it was not. So that leaves, you know, that leaves us to deal with the way it is.
So that means the electrical fund can be used the same as the general fund?
Yeah.
Well, I don't see it like that, but there was some
Why
really
not?
tricky footwork done. Fund 55 was dissolved, which wouldn't allow a firehouse to be built, and Fund 56 was formed, and the reserve account was moved into 56. 55 was closed, and therefore that was an allowable use. And since they could do an inter-fund, you read the letter that the Department of Revenue sent.
I didn't.
You can do an inter-fund transfer unless it is a restricted use. And our lawyer said that it wasn't. So, you know, if individuals or if this council wants to seek different legal advice, but other than that, our hands are tied.
Well, I didn't understand where she said, if it isn't, I forget the wording.
A restricted use?
She didn't use restricted. What did she use? What was the wording she used? I don't have my copy here. She didn't say restricted, but she...
Statutorily restricted.
Yeah.
Statutorily, well, that's restricted, okay.
Oh, okay,
Exactly. And
okay. What is the electric fund? It's not a restricted fund? Then if it isn't, why can't we transfer?
in my opinion, it is. In our lawyer's opinion, this was a legal maneuver.
Then we should be able to transfer the $450,000 out of electrical into the general, pay off the bill then.
No, you can borrow
Yeah.
for the reasons
I don't
listed
understand.
in the reserve fund. And now it has a new added reason, that of the fire hall. There are only certain reasons listed there. Mary Ann, Where are they listed? Are they?
It's in the resolution that created Fund 56.
Okay, and there's a list of things that you can use that money for that's put into that fund. And you can't use it for any other reason. Now, when they wanted to build a firehouse and they were spending money already and needed to cover it some way, is what legitimately happened, you know, then they went to fund the electric fund. When citizens started complaining, and citizens and council members started complaining that this wasn't a legal use for this money, we got a legal, the city got a legal opinion saying yes it was. Kevin, can you add anything to this? You were on the council at the time when all that took place, weren't you?
The truth is, I don't recall a legal opinion from the attorney. I could be wrong, but my understanding was that they went to the Oregon Department of Revenue and they gave them a way that they thought that they could accomplish what they were trying to do, and that was dissolving the fund. I honestly don't recall an opinion from the attorney.
Well, maybe there
on
wasn't
the
an
statutory
opinion
use
for
of-
our, what can we do about it now? Any suggestions? Shauna?
Madam Chair, does this have anything to do with the current budget? and what
Yes,
we're
when we're
at?
talking about bills, it certainly does. That's, you
This is
see,
old news. We need
loans.
to move
We have to
forward.
pay-
Loans discussion, that's what we're talking about. It's on the agenda, it's, we
I
received
ask
the
that you
information
move
for it.
forward.
I beg your pardon?
I ask that you move forward from this.
No, we're going to continue. Does everybody, could I please, how many people are in favor of continuing this conversation? Aye.
Aye.
Say aye. How many opposed? Shauna?
I oppose, I think we need to
Okay.
move forward, this is a fact, we need to move forward.
Um,
What's done is done, we need to move forward and.
We're
figure
trying
out
to
how we're
deal
gonna
with
fund it.
what was done, Shauna, and we're going to continue this conversation. The vote has been taken. Darlene?
When I talked to Sandy King at the Department of Revenue, she also stated that when she led the city through dissolving Fund 55 and creating 56, that she had no idea of the funds that were in 55, if they were of a restricted use or not. And so to call that a legal maneuver,
Who can say?
you can't say. And now we have the ORSs that say municipal utilities are of a restricted use, and we can read those and say that. So what she suggested was to go to the district attorney or the attorney general and get their idea, because in order to budget this, what other fund, if we don't go to the electrical fund, are we gonna go to Fund 5 to pay it? Is that the next obvious fund? For debt service, how are we going to pay
That
it?
is the next obvious.
And therefore, are we gonna set precedent that it's okay to use funds differently than they were intended to be used for?
By turning around and repeating the same,
By not having any culpability.
and I agree with you. And so, Rich, do you have any suggestions?
Well, I'm trying to get something clarified in my own mind. When it comes to restricted funds, you can't make inappropriate inter-fund transfers, but I don't know that you can't make inter-fund loans. And I don't think they're the same thing. In other words, if you just take money from here and give it to there, from a restricted fund, you can't do that. But if you loan money from here to there and it gets paid back, then I think it's, it may be legal. But I'm not gonna play lawyer, but I think there's a distinction. Every restricted fund I've ever seen basically said you can't just move money willy-nilly from here to there, but you can loan it.
Well, we have a municipal utility, and the rules could be different there.
I don't know.
Darlene?
If that $450,000 was deemed excess funds, and it comes from the ratepayers, then you would think that the $450,000 would go back to the ratepayers if it was excess funds collected from our utilities. And I believe that there is a board, I think Rich brought it up, there is a municipal utility board that could have some answers for us on this, on how those, there's not a lot of cities in Oregon that have their own utility company. And so these things don't come to the Department of Revenue a lot. And the way that this went about, I'm sure doesn't happen a lot. Those funds were put into that 55 is capital reserves. And that brings up another question. If we're gonna repay that into capital reserves, we're still unclear of, is capital reserves used for only that specified purpose? Because I read in the minutes, I wrote down here, where Bernard says that the council can use capital reserve funds for anything that,
No,
other
that's,
purposes.
that's
No,
not true.
I wrote it down here.
Right.
March 25th, 2009, page 2, the question said, can council choose to spend capital reserves differently than as directed? Bernard Seeger said council can choose to spend it on other things. And so that sends a red flag to me that if we're going to collect that money back into capital reserves, years from now.
Let Mary Ann answer those questions about the capital reserve. It's my understanding that's restricted and it can't be used at will.
Capital reserve has money in it from the funds as I transfer throughout the course of the year. At the budget time, and I put it in here, the department heads go through and say, we need to purchase this, this, and this. These are all capital items, and that's what we have in our plan to purchase. Whether that purchase comes about, we don't know at the time budget is occurring. If you budget for, say, a $5,000 air pump, and you've gotten through half the season, you don't see you need an air pump, you can utilize that $5,000 for another purpose if something has come up. It is a line item, it is a dollar figure, but it doesn't have to be used for the purchase of the pump. It can be used for purchase of another capital item. And I believe that's what he was saying. It can be used for another purpose as a capital item for that department. It doesn't have to be utilized for that specific project or that specific piece.
But it stays in that department.
But it stays in that department for that purchase. And you'll see that there are several items on the capital projects list to come out of capital reserve. And if that department chooses not to buy that particular item, but decides, oh, hey, we need this more than we need this, then that's when you can choose another item that is a capital project item.
So
Does that make any
Is
sense?
that not what happened with 55? Wasn't it a capital reserve fund, 55?
55 was a capital
Dissolved,
reserve fund, yes.
Created a new one with a new use, isn't that?
That is correct.
So basically, there's not a specific use for that. I mean, they can.
There is a specific use in the resolution as to what the projects can be and what you can use them for capital projects. But like I said, and if I'm not making any sense, please let me know. We have projects, if we find that we don't need a project, but we need something else or an item, then we can utilize that money for an item. It is just it's a dollar figure and a dollar amount that is for the budget. Now, you can't go over that budget total. So we budget 450, we can't go over that limit in the budget. We can't spend 500,000 without going to a supplemental budget, okay? So does that answer that question of how?
So basically, they can be deemed for other purposes, it can be.
Within the fund.
Within the fund.
They did it. History shows.
And basically, if there's something else they want to use it for that they can't use it for, now historically, they just dissolve the fund and make another one, so.
Change the
Number.
But any purchase that is out of capital reserve that is over a dollar amount of the city administrator has to go before council to buy. I mean, I can't just go out and buy a $5,000 computer. I have to bring it before council to do that because it is over the city administrator's limit.
Well, that certainly wasn't done in many cases in the past, and so I don't think we can count on that. I mean, there was a lot of spending done over the limits without coming back to council. Anybody have, George?
Now, I have a question for Richard and Mary Ann. Okay, so what my question is, so we have the $450,000 for the fire department, plus whatever interest has occurred to date. We have the $24,000 that was loaned from the water department, plus interest to date. Then we have the $42,000 from Mimi Morissette's SDCs that never came through and was never done.
That's only 13,000, George. It's partially paid back, we just have.
It's only 13.
$13,000.
It's only 13 now? Okay.
13,500.
Yes.
Okay, so,
Did you add the Ruby Mason?
well, and then the Ruby Mason's gonna be, what was that, about 29,000?
20, yeah.
29,000.
Something like that. I'll have to go look.
Okay, so what my question is to you then is, those are basically our debts that have not been addressed. Okay, so from what I read in this, it says that we can basically borrow from Peter. Peter can borrow again from Peter, and we can establish a 10-year loan repayment for all those debts. If the board, if the council votes and approve that. Is that correct?
If it weren't for the question of whether that's appropriate to take from the electric fund to make the loan, that would be correct. And they would have to be done separately.
But my understanding is we're taking it from, it's a hypothetical thing. We're just borrowing the money from who we borrowed it from and making another loan for $10,000 or for whatever that dollar amount. So we should be able to make a loan for each one of those for 10 years and then come up with a total 10-year payment schedule to repay that loan.
Yes.
Okay? So is that something that the Budget Committee needs to make a recommendation to the council to do that so that they have an answer right after our next council meeting?
That is the direction I was going in, but the question has been raised by Darlene and by Laura and by others, and basically I've always had the same question, but I assume we did it once, and now we're, I don't see any other, the question has been raised, is it legal for us to borrow from our electric company reserves? That's the question. And Darlene feels, after talking to several people, it isn't. I don't know.
Okay, but
I'd like to get everybody's opinion on this. Tiffany, what do you feel about this? I'd like to go around the table and, Kevin?
I think, my opinion is the legality of it, and that whole discussion kind of goes outside the realm of this
I
particular
believe that also.
committee. I think that's something the council needs to address, along with legal counsel, and I don't think that really should be part of this discussion. I think coming up with the money to pay the loans off is where this particular group needs to focus its attention.
And my recommendation was going to be that this committee take a vote and request that the council put this on their next agenda and pass a resolution to supply us with the footwork we need to budget the debt. Rich?
I mean, if the committee wants us to give you information on what the principal and interest payments would be if you reset the term, say to 10 years, and we can do that.
I think that's up to the council, because
Well, it's up-
during the
it's up to the-
resolution, the
it's up-
council would decide for what term of time. That's not our, we don't get to do that.
Well, I agree at the end of the day, the council makes the decision,
Right.
but I'm not too sure if the appropriateness of just asking a question, because we need to budget something. And we
Absolutely.
can't budget if we don't know the term.
No. Darlene?
I don't think we've even determined yet. It said a maximum of 10 years on that loan, and we're into it 3 years. So I don't think you're gonna borrow another, get
No.
another loan and get another full 10
You
years.
can, yes, you can. You can reset the clock.
I asked her, I asked Amy.
I asked,
She didn't-
and,
No, we didn't.
no, I asked specifically that question, and yes,
So we
you
get
can
another full
reset
10
the
years.
clock.
So we know the term.
But it's not automatically reset. Those terms are discussed and decided at city council when they make the resolution, and I imagine they'll look at the repayment plan before they set, because the resolution is required legally to have a repayment plan in that resolution. You have to say how you're gonna pay it back before you borrow it. That's the law. Rich?
We got an email back from Department of Revenue saying, yeah, we could reset the clock to 10,
Yes, absolutely.
to 10 years. But again, I
But that's up
I
to
can't
city
tell
council.
you what the principal and interest payments would be, and you can't figure out how it's gonna get paid unless you agree on what the term would be.
But if it's on, George,
We're roughly gonna be in debt approximately $550,000, okay, approximately. So all we gotta do is divide 550,000 by 120.
It's about $4,500.
How much?
So
It's about 4,500.
so it's about $4,500 a month. Is that right, Kevin?
Yeah.
I said, what's that, zero?
That's just principal.
Well, that's all it has to be, because they said it could be zero interest.
4583.
and so are you talking now about taking, well, that would be up to the city council too, a larger amount of money and covering it all, or are we going to be doing these separately?
Well, I think ideally you do them, you lump them all together, and then you have one payment that covers it all. That makes it simple. And then it's simple for, as far as the
Including
board
the-
here, to figure out how much money we need to allocate.
Right.
So we got $4,500 a month times 12 a year. Yes, Kevin?
No, I was just
I'm sorry.
wanting to get in line
I'm
after
sorry,
you.
it's bad habit.
With blood leading the mayor.
I'm sorry, Sandra, I apologize.
Well, you are the mayor.
You ain't got the gavel. No, it's your
It's up to me to be
responsibility, I
respectful.
apologize.
Tom?
I would just say with discussion on this, is obviously, we're trying to pay these loans off, and I'm real in favor of, we've been just sitting around so far, doing nothing. But it seems to me the only thing we can pay them off with is the general fund, so until we go over to the general fund and we look at the general fund, we aren't gonna know, that we can't take it from water, we can't take it from sewer, we can't take it.
Exactly.
But we've got to take the general fund, so
Exactly.
eventually, in order to deal with this thing, we got, it's gonna happen during the, going over the general fund.
I personally would prefer not rolling that $13,000 from the leftover Mimi Morissette transaction into this long-term debt. That's, will be a 10-year, I think that should be paid off. Kevin?
Well, the 13,000 remaining, that was a water system improvement. That's what that money went to. It went to improve the main line that runs up the hill into Shaw Holland. So that is a water department. So that could, it is being funded now out of the water department, out of the
Water
SDC.
SDCs.
Yes, but out of the water. So that's not necessarily a general fund. But I think the mechanics of it are really irrelevant. We need to figure out how to, I mean, if that's the direction we're going, we need to figure out how to come up with $4,600. If we do each loan individually and whatever the council does, it doesn't matter. It's not gonna change the
No, I
amount that
agree.
we're gonna need to come up
But
with.
we need a recommendation to have council put that on their next agenda, and so we can get that done in a timely way. Darlene,
Can we budget that expense out of the fund that created that cost, out of Fund 5?
doesn't have that much money,
General,
It has to come out of the general fund.
and which is, that also includes that department.
because I don't want to be a part, if we're going to go through the electrical department again, I feel it's illegal. And if you can have another attorney or somebody to tell you that we can use it, then that's fine. But I don't want to be a part of another illegal process. So I'd say it has to come out of the general fund.
Laura?
I feel the same way. I also feel that all the departments should have their own shadow that shows exactly what they are doing for their department, both in revenues and expenses, and what is the ratio between debt and revenue, and are they a good investment or not? We should know these things at each budget year.
But this has to do, we're talking about debt now.
I know what we're talking about, but you still have to have revenue to deal with debt.
Yes, you
And you need to know
do.
where you're at in each department, and if the departments are all being commingled and colluded, how can you possibly know who's responsible for what and who's carrying what?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I'd make a motion that the committee recommends to council to figure out the loans and their repayments at the next meeting. Or the loans and the terms of the loans at their next meeting, and to have a chance to address it at our next meeting.
Tiffany?
I'll second that.
still a chance, what do you call that? Question?
Yeah.
Okay, question?
Yes. I do have a question before we, as far as the debt goes. On this capital reserve fund balance sheet, it shows that we had a fire station loan of $450,000. But, and then on this other capital reserve page that we got, it's just little with the lines and stuff, it shows that there's an expenses above loan of $44,670.70. Where did that money come from?
That's a really good question, and we're trying, no, I'm serious. I've been asking that question for some time because I can't figure it out. We're trying, number one, it could be simply an accounting error, because I don't know how I would do that. I mean, it's almost physically impossible. So we're looking into it, try to figure out what the difference between that $44,000, why it's even there. It shouldn't be.
Well, it's all, the $44,000, it all shows that it should be there because there are expenditures offsetting it, aren't there?
Well, you would,
We have a
yeah,
sheet
you
here
would-
of all the expenditures, so the money was spent, it came from somewhere.
right. Either that or it was calculated wrong, but I don't know where, how we got that 44,000. So anyway, all I'd say is, we're looking into it, give us a little bit of time to work through it, because we can't find an answer.
Because my question is, I mean, it looks like we have another almost $45,000 debt here that may need to be serviced.
Right.
I mean, so we're, I mean,
Well, we're gonna do our best to answer the question, because I have the same question, so does Marion.
And was that money taken out of the capital reserve as well? Or just spent and then not covered?
Well, you can't just spend it without paying somebody something, so that's why it doesn't make a lot of sense. If either,
Mary Ann, you're the finance officer, do you understand what happened?
I understand that we received money from many, many areas, and they weren't deposited
Stop it, please.
into one fund to pay the debt. So it is possible, and again, I don't know until I look, it is possible that perhaps the OIB loan of $300,000, that's where that $44,000 should have been charged to. I'm the one that provided you that information, so I'm just as disturbed with that as you are when I went through the books and found that. So I've got to find out whether that $44,000 should have been charged against the OIB loan, or some other part of revenue that we received. And so I'm just asking for a little bit of time. I've got the books out, I've got all the grant stuff out. I'm just trying to find
Tiffany?
the time to get to that.
okay, so you're saying that it might be part of the OIB loan already, or, okay.
Honestly, I have to agree with Rich. I don't see how we could have incurred that cost without the revenue. Okay, so I just think it is an error in where those expenses got charged to. So I'm going to be dealing with that, and I'm going to be talking to the auditor about that.
So that would affect the amount of debt that we're dealing with, correct?
Yes, what I'm saying.
Okay.
Possibly.
Do I have
I have a second to,
I have a motion and a second on the floor.
Could you restate the motion on the second? Oh, okay, never mind.
And there's the second. Tiffany, that's
Would you
question.
read it back in case?
Kevin moved to have council figure out the loans and terms at their next meeting. Darlene second.
oh darn, yeah, I'm sorry.
What?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Passed unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay, so I guess we'll figure out how to pay it after the city council figures out how much.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I see that the tourism committee chairperson is here, and maybe we could move ahead in the agenda to take care of that fund, and then we can come back to the other discussion items.
Sandra, just because we have a podium and there's an empty mic, if Donna could come here, it helps.
Okay.
For the record.
Donna?
Would you like to do that?
Do we need a motion or?
No,
Okay,
it's your-
that would be fine
Okay.
with me. I have no objection. so everybody needs to turn to that page, Tourism Fund, which is on page 22 to 24 of part 2.
Page 22.
22? Yep.
Does, Donna, would you like to start this off, or?
I
okay.
would, because I actually have a question now. If there was a discussion about all of the funds going into tourism and then transferring to the general fund, is that happening in this budget year?
Not the current one that we are in, no.
The one that we're budgeting
The one you're
for,
budgeting for.
that we're trying to get that done, if that is the proper way to do it. That, yes, Kevin? It's been a recommendation to council, is
Yeah.
that true?
It has been. I guess I could see how that could cause some,
Currently, it
we
goes,
certainly could,
the percentages as they're split go straight into the funds, straight into tourism, straight into the general
Correct, but
fund.
it was
But you-
discussed to change
yeah.
that.
Right, and
What's next?
I looked at it in terms of the ORS on both the state and the local lodging tax, and it doesn't address it. It doesn't say what you can or can't do, so I have to contact Department of Revenue to find out if there's some legal restrictions on whether you can send it all to one fund and then transfer some over to another fund, or how you could do that. I don't know yet.
Kevin?
since we're back on that particular thing, right now, when a TRT payment is received, where does that payment get booked? I mean, there has to be somewhere where it says, I received a check for $7,000 from Motel X. It gets booked somewhere as a receipt, right? And then it gets split?
No, at the time that we enter the receipt, we split it in our counting system, 70-30, at the time we receive the receipt.
So
So if I get
there's nowhere in your accounting system where you show that you received a check from Motel X for X number of dollars.
Yeah, it shows that, but our distribution is split.
I understand that, but
It
somewhere,
shows the check, yes, on the cash receipt.
so it's booked into your cash receipts.
It goes into cash,
Okay. So
and then it gets
if-
split.
If you went through the cash receipts, you would have all of the TRT payments,
Yes,
the total amounts.
yes.
Okay. So, okay.
Okay, I guess I have a question at this time. Is, Donna, are you informed when your account receives receives these funds?
I get a accounting of it at some point.
And have you ever tracked that to see if you're getting more than the anticipated budgeted amount?
No. I just assume that we are.
Okay, that you assume that you're getting, because you were working under the assumption, so I understand, that all you got was the amount that's been proposed in the budget, or because that's different than, there's been 115 budgeted for that, when in fact it's been more like 125 or 130. And this budget is based on it being 115. So have you gotten more than you have budgeted for throughout the year?
I'd have to go back and check that, because when you get the actual, I'd have to go back and look, where it shows on here the actual amount. Is that more than what we budgeted? I don't know. I haven't looked at it.
We actually track it two ways. One is the numbers that are in here that show the actuals are actually what we received looking back at that year, and then we project an estimate for the next year based on that. So we have the actual dollars for the entire year. We also produce a monthly report in terms of a cash balance that goes out to everybody that says you have X amount of dollars left in your fund, that you've spent this and you've got this much left. So it'd be, you could be pretty easy to figure out. The way you usually look at it is for salary and things like that, every month is a percentage, and you can tell where you are in terms of your actuals. If you're 9 months into the budget, then you should be 75, your actuals should be 75%, and you should have 25% left. It's not as easy when you're doing projects, but anyway, I mean, we report both of them, they're both.
Tiffany?
Well, if that's true, then, I mean, if you look at the current year on page 22, through the end of January, we have currently 49,000, but yet we're only, and which.
No, 25.
Right, for revenues?
That's the beginning balance.
Oh, beginning balance, okay, I see, all right, I apologize then. But even still, that's still half the year, so that assumes that there's gonna be, you're still gonna have more than,
Bigger portion.
yeah, you should,
Not the winter, you'll get
Well,
a
you-
bigger portion in the fall.
I believe a larger amount should be budgeted for hotel motel room tax. And what page was that on, Mary Ann? Do you remember where I picked up that $115,000? Where I think it was in the general fund revenues?
I think it's the bar graph.
It's on the graph that I gave you for, the tourism revenues at the last meeting, at the last packet.
It's in this pile.
There's a bar graph, like this. That shows, for fiscal year 09-10 was 128,000. For fiscal year 10-11 is 100,000 right now.
Uh-huh. Is there any one place where is this budgeted as a whole in this budget book? Is it in
You
the,
have to combine, Fund 8 and Fund 1 for a whole number. So you have 80,500 budgeted for 10-11 in general,
8,500.
80,500. And then in Fund 8, you have budgeted 34,500. That's your $115,000.
Fund
Okay. Page 22, Sandra,
Okay,
is Fund 8.
right. Oh, I see. And where does it show up in the general fund is what I was
Is
wondering.
page 1,
Uh-huh,
if you go down about 6 lines, it says transit room tax
okay,
assessment, that 80,500.
okay.
That's where you got the 115 total.
Exactly, okay, thank you very much.
Mhm.
And so, it would be my suggestion, my first suggestion is that we raise that to an appropriate level and more realistic projection of what we're gonna receive. Donna, would you like to open this up and comment on your budget?
Well, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. The only thing I would like to say is the contingency fund is 4,000 too much. That 4,000 of that needs to be moved. Mary Ann and I discussed this, and 4,000 of that needs to be moved up to dues, publications, and notices.
I thought that was supposed to go into brochures.
It's a lot of publication dues and
I thought it was
notices.
supposed to go into
Oh,
brochures.
it has brochure, okay, into advertising, display fees, brochures, and
Yes.
webpage.
So that would make that 24,618, and that would reduce the contingency to a more appropriate level.
Would be 23,000.
23,000, whoops, grade it now. And reduce the 7930 in the contingency to 3930.
What that is the port pays half, so Mary Ann wanted to do a line item for the income from the port, because they actually pay us. We pay for the brochures and then they reimburse us.
And so that's a line item under income, reimbursement, income brochures, $4,000.
Yes.
And that is where the $4,000 is reflected in advertising, display, and fees?
Yes.
Does anybody have any suggestions on how much should be budgeted or projected for the hotel?
I have a
motel?
comment on it.
Yeah,
If you look just strictly at revenues, the fund's been declining for the last 3 years. If you run the numbers on the current through January 31st, that would, using 7 months and then adding 5, it gets you to about 42, maybe, or not even that. But I mean, anyway, the thing is, the revenue on this, it comes in from, forget the beginning balance, it comes in, has been in decline since, or even, you know, it's been around 36, then 30 now it's at 25, and we got 5 months to go. So I don't know that, I don't see any jump in revenue.
I thought it was growing.
well, that's, not- it's, you only have 115,000 budgeted for,
Well, I'm
or
just talking
reflected.
about, I'm just talking about money that's coming in the door from the transient room tax annually. It may have grown, but quite frankly, it's grown because of the beginning balance, because money wasn't being spent.
No, the hotel motel room tax that is actually collected has grown.
You know, 0809, it was 36.7. You know, 9010, it was 39,002. And currently, through January, we've collected 25.
You're looking at, okay,
I'm
now
looking
I
at-
would like to look at the projections of your hotel motel room tax.
I am, that's
Room
it,
assessed income. Right.
that's it.
The bar graph, look at your bar graph.
You have 115 budgeted, you get more than 115.
No, I'm working off the actuals in the chart. I mean, not the table,
Well,
but in the budget.
115 is the 34 and the Fund 1 actual, and those are, that makes 115,000. Darlene?
Doesn't the bar graph show a steady
Yes, it does.
increase? I can't find it right now, but it went down to 100,000 because it was as of that date. It wasn't the whole year where it collected going down to 100,000. And then you brought up the,
Well, and if that's not reflected in your actuals, there's something wrong.
right.
And, yes.
Bernard, maybe the minutes should be checked. Bernard did do a presentation that said the TRT tax is climbing every year.
Yes, it is, and we have that in that, I don't have that chart.
$132,000
Madam Chair?
already ahead of last, 3 months this year ahead of last.
That's what I thought.
Do you want me to make some copies?
That would be great, thank you very much.
Yeah, I was looking at the tourism fund, which is what we were talking about.
Well,
I didn't realize you were
then
talking
something's
about.
wrong if the hotel motel room taxes are accelerating, yet that column of the
Well,
is flat, right, so that to me would indicate they're not getting their share of the revenues if those are actual.
This is the 30%. That's what I was looking at, because I thought we were talking about just the tourism fund, but the 30 plus the 70
It's 115.
has been flat for the last 3 years. It's been almost perfectly flat.
What has been flat? It has
The income.
accelerated, it's up to,
Well-
it's up to 138.
That's
It's
what the-
never been below 125.
Just wait till we get the chart in, it shows the entire revenue.
Maybe we can take a break while she's making copies.
The chart is the entire revenue.
Right, yes,
So a third of every one of those full ones goes to tourism.
right.
And it's been growing, so tourism should grow.
Is it?
Their third should grow along with that.
How's that?
I think we're getting off into a. No, I'm not.
Join in then.
If you look. Yeah, you're right.
Yes, please.
So 09, the 0809 shows an actual TRT revenue of 121. 09-010 shows an actual TRT revenue of 130.
Where are we
This
at?
is the two, this is the two added together. This is
What
the
document?
general fund. The general fund, transient room assessment, and actual revenue,
Comes out to be.
85,000 in 09, 91,000 in 10. And then if you add in the 30% in the transient, in the tourism budget, 36,000 for 09, 39,000 for 10. So that's the total revenues, and it has been climbing.
The problem here is, there's a disconnect, and that is, the chart here with the graph is per calendar year, and the information in the budget is fiscal year. But if you did look at the calendar year numbers,
We have calendar year, fiscal year.
okay, well, okay, so the bottom, there's a fiscal year at the bottom which says, if you do 08, 09, it's 123.7 thousand, 09, 10 was 128. So it went from 129 to 123 to 128. That's, to me, that's pretty level for the last 3 fiscal years.
I agree, so I
Fiscal
just,
years-
It's
fiscal
not,
years or
it's
calendar
not,
years?
well, there's both in this chart. The top is calendar, down here is fiscal, and it's, the tolerances for those 2 years, I don't really see, it grew from last year, but it dropped from the year before, so you're still around the same place.
I don't show it
Look
drawing.
at the start of 211. Look how it's out, business, everything.
Oh, yeah.
it's outshining what it did last year. I see $115,000 as being a low projection, when last year you got 138. Or it doesn't say that
I don't see,
here.
where's 138?
128.
Calendar year.
Okay.
No, in the calendar year, it does say 130.
But then you can look at that calendar year, it was in 010, so if you want to go the fiscal year of what they've had now, you would just add July, you would have most of it here to get the fiscal year, and it would be even higher, because it's higher than last year in 2011. January, February, and March in 2011 exceeded last year, so it's not down. So I think that we can count on it being at least 125, and that we should budget another $10,000.
Well, there's no legal issue. If you want to budget more, you can. It's just make sure when you get there that you don't think you're going to spend it all, because it may not arrive.
But it'd be nice to
Can-
have the actual closer figure, and then
Let's
Sure.
we'll
put
take
up our
that into
hands and talk one at a time, okay? Kevin?
Well, Mr. Carson's right, as long as we don't add expenditures, I have no trouble with raising the expected revenue, right? As long as we don't have an offsetting expenditure to go along with it.
Well, you have to.
You have to have-
The fund has to balance.
Budget line.
But you could put it in contingency.
Contingency.
The difference, I mean, you could put in contingency. That could be moved out if it was a banner year.
But, okay, but one thing we're not addressing with this fund is the decline in the beginning balance, which to me is more important. You can't really control what the revenue is. People are gonna stay or they're not gonna stay. You can't control, A, what percentage goes into here, and then B, what we're gonna spend out of it.
And that was in the auditor's report for most of the funds, that all the beginning balances are in decline, and we have to be cognizant of that before we hit the wall.
It's too late.
Too late.
So are they declining at a rate of about $10,000 a year? Does it?
They are, but, I mean, we're doing that, not necessarily on purpose, I don't wanna say it that way, but we're using that money. How much money do we need to have set aside that we
Exactly.
can't touch?
Exactly.
There was $80-some thousand in there that wasn't doing any good for Cascade Locks businesses, because it was just sitting in our funds. I mean, I don't see that it's a negative thing that we've been using that money.
I know.
Now, if we take that money all the way down to zero, that's another story. But using up some of the 80,000, to me, makes total sense.
I agree.
So,
Tom?
when I was on tourism, the way Kate put it to me on, we're different than a lot of other funds, this is different than a lot of other funds, because you're only getting your TRTs on a quarter. So the only reason you have a carryover on here is because you can spend all of your money and still have a quarter left in that money. So you carry over and make sure that you have enough money, and that's all you're carrying over for. That's the only reason you're carrying over, is to make sure you got money to spend in your last quarter. Otherwise, you would spend the whole thing.
So what they would do is they'd have us budget enough of carryover if we wanna spend money in those last 3 months. Now, if you wanna spend any money in those last 3 months, that's fine, now you don't have any money. It doesn't hurt you guys. Tourism, it doesn't hurt, we're not paying people's salaries, we're not paying, if you wanna spend the whole darn thing, that's up to you. And the only reason, as I understand, we carry over here is because you're not getting monthly money, you're getting quarterly. And when the budget cycle ends, you still got another quarter to go, so you have to have some carryover in case you wanna spend money in that quarter. That's the one we kind of carry over. Now, we did some, and when we were there too, we were looking, it depends what you wanna do. And when I was there, we were looking at, wanting to have a person we wanted to hire, when we hired Phyllis. So we took 2 or 3 years and not spent a lot of money. We built up our reserve big. It was a big reserve, but we did that because we said we're gonna contract a person. We were trying to look ahead. We're gonna contract a person for 3 years. So we wanted to have enough money in our bank to pay for that person for 3 years. So we carried, there was a reason for us having big carry. So tourism has a little bit different than everybody else. So, but they carry over because of their quarter behind.
And your beginning balance next year will come from these line items not being totally depleted, correct?
Correct. And I would just wanted to point out on this graph too, that if you look underneath, under the fiscal year's income, 2010, 2011, so that's at 100,000, which means tourism would get 30 of that. And that's only through January?
No, the graph is through March, the budget, current is through January, so you're missing a quarter as far as the current through on the budget.
What's that on the graph? That's through.
On the graph, we're up through March, which is our last quarter that we received TRT.
And that money's not reflected on the budget?
In the current, you'll have a current column on the budget.
And it's not
That's only
reflected
through
there?
January, it's not through March.
Oh, so we've already received the TRT tax, we just
For
don't
March.
know it yet.
Yeah, you received it in April.
Okay.
So is it the will of Ida?
Well, I was just gonna say we had April, May, June, then.
Right, one more quarter.
Right,
Yes.
and it seems like, everybody that has been coming to tourism too, that we help fund, everything's going up. Please, we want to have $1,000 more for, say, for example, the music, that we had at the pavilion with the wine tasting, etc. Not only that, there's also, we fund the 4th of July.
But you're speaking as a tourism member now,
Yes.
not as a budget committee
Yeah, I
member,
am
which I think is a bit,
No, which I am reflecting why we need to have the realistic amount also in it, and why there's a reserve.
I do understand what you're saying, Guida, but we did learn at the Department of Revenue that, you can't wear both hats and sit there. Darlene, you wrote that down in your notes?
It said that volunteers were partial.
Right.
Budget, so if you're a volunteer on the committee, then that.
So I think you should be able to speak as a committee member, but I have
I'm
question
speaking.
about, okay.
And I would also question any other fund that I can see that there's an increase in expenditures and the revenue coming in.
Well, this is your proposed budget, as I see it, and so are you asking for us to change your proposed budget? I think we need to make it clear what you're requesting. Donna?
Well, I would just like to say that I'm given those numbers basically by Mary Ann, and that's what we go off of, is whatever projection she sees. So if there's gonna be more money projected for TRT tax, as it looks like there is, I would like to see it go up, because we do have some things that we want to do.
Right.
that
And
we
I
were
would
not
like to
able-
see that be reflected the way it's more likely to come in as well. Darlene?
Even though your beginning balance for next year is gonna be less, because you're gonna have more, those aren't gonna be carryover funds at the end of the year, but you'll be able to spend them more. And also this committee, you don't print brochures every year, and several years went by where there was less committee members, less activity, less expenses, and this committee is actually brochures, doing ads, and so they're gonna have the expenses, which then also shows on our chart of the increase in transient room tax coming back for the advertising that you're spending. So I think you're doing a great job. I have a question here on the plants and supplies and the landscape flower maintenance. I thought that was gonna be taken out of your budget and general fund was gonna pay that? Is that a council, recommendation of council? Or how, do we budget and keep that in there, or?
Well, I think now's the time if you want that done, because this is your budget that you have presented to us, and it includes these items. And so if you want us to consider anything other than this, I think it's the time now to make that case.
I would like you to consider to take anything that's not directly tourist related out of our budget and take it out of the general fund. The lawyer, the flower and maintenance, the summer worker, the camera operation for the meetings, all of those things to come out of the general, out of the 70% that goes into the general fund instead of out of our 30%.
Is there any discussion about, Mary Ann?
I do have a discussion or just a comment on attorney fees. And I know we've had this discussion with Donna, but there are times that tourism does use the attorney for an RFP or things like that. So I do recommend you leave something in there, because if they do go out for another RFP or need attorney advice, that is their request for that.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, the 70% is intended to offset the mitigating costs of the tourism efforts. And so I don't see where that wouldn't be a general fund obligation myself, but, Tom?
So, again, on the attorney fees, and as we were talking about before, that's a line item. If they don't use the attorney, they get to a certain point, they don't need the attorney, they can put that money into something else, is that?
That's not how it works.
If
I thought we said we did.
if
I thought we were talking about.
if they don't use, they've got $500 budgeted. If they don't use the $500 and they find that, dues and publications, they went over their line item, that's one place that you do it by category. So that $500 could help compensate another quote line item, but we don't move the money, okay? It stays in that line item. What they don't use rolls into a beginning fund balance. But if you don't have the dollar figure there and you spend it, then that money has to come from a different line item in that category. So if they don't have 500 and they spend 500 on the attorney, then perhaps, just an
Contingency.
example, tourism seat events only has 10,000 now instead of 10,500, because you've got to find that money somewhere.
But on the same hand, if you don't use the attorney, you can give that money in, someone else.
You can use it
I wanna use
within that
money.
category, yes, within the
I have
category.
a question. Mary Ann,
Materials and services.
now, when you went back and charged,
Right, okay.
we had excess attorney bills. And when you went back to collect the city's excess attorney bills, didn't you go to every fund under attorney to collect that money?
I have not done that. I made that recommendation to council, they voted not to do that recommendation, just to leave things as they are, and as the categories get to the point where they're over budget, then I need to come back and we'll have to transfer some money.
And so, is what you're saying, if there is no need for an attorney, the $500 will be there, not spent at the end of the year, that the city won't prevail upon that money to cover attorney's fees?
Right, it'll roll
No,
over.
it just
For
rolls
something
over into the
other.
beginning fund.
Okay,
Sandra?
yes, Donna.
Now, it was my understanding that we pay a percentage of the overall attorney fees, because we are up to like $1,100, and we just did, we haven't used the attorney that much. So how have we spent $1,100 if we don't pay a percentage?
Okay. The attorney bills from the spreads when I first started is the spreads that we continue to do. And that is correct. I'm not gonna deny that. That is a percentage. It is a very minor percentage, but it is a percentage. That is how I was directed to do the spreads. Should council choose to change the spreads, or our city administrator, then I need to be directed to do that.
Right, but I'm just pointing out that we do pay a percentage of the overall attorney fees. This is not just tourism attorney fees.
And I provided you spreads in your budget book to show those spreads to you,
Right.
because that, I think, is,
Right, but that's a bit contrary to what you were just telling us. If this $500 doesn't get spent, it won't be spent. In fact, it will be spent.
in the spreads, yes, and perhaps I needed to make that distinction, Sandra, and I'm sorry.
No, I just misunderstood, or there was
No.
a lack of communication or something.
No,
Okay, because that $500 will not be there at the end of the year, even if tourism does not directly use that. So let's not, you know, is that correct? It will be gone as their
yes, unless we change the
percentage.
spreads,
Okay.
yes.
Kevin?
Actually, there's gonna be more than $500 gone, because they're gonna use money out of the rest of the items to meet that spread. So, if the spread is 5% and the total amount needed is $1,500, there's gonna be money taken from these other materials and services. It's going to be used to pay for the attorney out of this fund.
I would like to ask for a motion to, that this be calculated in a different way, and only the direct expenses of the tourism committee be taken out, and they be charged only for direct, not a percentage of the overall city's cost, which have been absorbent at times. Is there a motion to that effect? Laura?
I was just still questioning, like,
Okay, go ahead.
What is the spread? How is it a software program we're talking
It's
about?
in your budget book here.
It's an Excel spreadsheet that, when I arrived here, that was the spreads that they did for all attorney bills. The auditor does get spread because tourism has a fund that gets audited. And utilities are spread, contracted services are spread. Now, some of these do not affect tourism, by no means, but some of them do.
So the formula, is it something where you could say, like Kevin and Don was suggesting, like maybe it's 5% that's going to tourism? Is there kind of a number we can see, and what is the range being affected to each department? Maybe we could adjust it a little bit to help you.
And I would like to add too, that, you know, we used to have a lawyer on contingency that, and it made more sense to have everybody pay a share of that.
You mean retainer?
Or contract, on
Retainer.
retainer, right.
1.4.
We used to have a lawyer on
And maybe
retainer.
that's where this formula.
And it made more sense to ask everybody to pay a percentage of what it costs to have that lawyer. But now we pay by the hour, so it doesn't make any sense to charge inappropriate departments for other departments' expenses. Kevin?
The spread is on the next to the last page in the book for the attorney, and it's 1.4% for the tourism fund. And I don't disagree that if the tourism department uses the attorney for an RFP or whatever, that they shouldn't pay the bill for it. But I do totally disagree with the fact that they pay 70% into the general fund to cover city expenses, but then they get dinged for 1.4% of the attorney's bill, which they've already paid for.
Which has
with the
nothing to do with
70%.
them.
It's double dipping really is what we're coming back to.
So,
And additionally, I would also say, this is my opinion, the personnel expenses don't meet the ORS for the definition of tourism-related activities. Neither does the landscape, flowers, and maintenance. And we've already heard that from the attorney that landscape, flowers, and maintenance is not a TRT, ORS defined expenditure.
That's a summer person for water.
Laura?
Does the city then, if tourism doesn't incur those costs, and if our revenues are exceedingly poor, and our debt is exceedingly high, do we
do we have,
In other words, if tourism doesn't do it and it goes into general fund, that's just another thing on
we
that.
just had a
Can we
presentation.
vote not to do it?
We had a presentation, I guess we can, but we had a presentation at city council, which really, by somebody from the tourism committee, which said they thought, you know, they were told at a conference that curb appeal was very important. And, they have 70%, of these tax monies that are designated to offset the expenses of tourism. So I personally feel that such activities should take place out of that 70%. Laura?
So are we talking about just this, the rest of this budget year and then the next budget?
No, not the rest of this. We have nothing to do
So
with
we're
the
just
rest
talking
of
about the
this.
next budget year?
This
And
budget
we're-
year that we're budgeting for now.
And so we are saying that it's going to, the split is going to continue with a 70 split for general fund and 30 to tourism? I thought.
Yes.
We don't have any,
that was changed.
control over that. This
Yes.
group doesn't have any control over what the split is.
So 2011 will stay status of 70?
Yes.
I'm just saying that we
For
can't
now.
make a decision.
Oh,
on
we
the
don't
split.
know until council addresses it?
No, this is what we have to work with. But, you know, we can work with what we have, and I think that we need to discuss the fact that some of us feel these aren't expenses that should be borne out of this 30%, since they're keeping 70%. Tom?
No, go
Or-
ahead, Tom had his
okay.
own first.
Well, I just, and I don't know, but just listen to tourism from what they're talking, and it appears that they kind of, I don't know, it sounds like they kind of like to have control of how the town looks with the flowers and that kind of stuff. If you take that out of here, they're no longer in control of that. Somebody else is spending it, somebody else is taking care of it and doing whatever.
Not necessarily. That would be a council decision, who they wanted to designate the improvements for those flowers, et cetera. They could give it to the city committee or form another one. Laura?
My question, so let's say we change this, because tourism is only getting 30 and 70, therefore it's only befitting that the larger should pay. However, what if council then chooses to reverse that, and then general fund is still responsible for paying for that, while they have a larger share? Is that possible?
You mean after the fact?
That's what I'm saying, is it possible that council is going to change this split?
You know, that's something that we can't anticipate, because
Well, I
we
know,
could
but
look
we're
at any
asking us
fund
to-
and say there could be changes. We can only deal with what I mean, in my opinion, we can only deal with what we're presented, not what might happen. Unless we know something's gonna happen, then we're obligated to deal with it. Rich?
And if it does happen in the near future, you could still change it. One thing I just want to mention,
I don't see where you could for another
You have to
budget
do a
year.
supplemental budget.
well, after the
Supplemental
fact,
budgets can't be made when, well, it wouldn't be done now, so it probably could in this
It would
case.
have to be done after the 1st of July.
Rich is still going. Rich has.
I just wanted,
Rich, I'm sorry.
I went through the numbers on the top here, looked at the 9 months we have, and if I carried over the 3 months from last year, basically I got $140,000, of which 30% is $42,000, so the $34,500 here could go up, I think, easily to $42,000 in terms of income from the.
I think we have to be more realistic when we do those revenues, so they have the entire, particularly since their revenues are declining, I think that this would help with that. I asked for a motion to,
Do something.
I don't have any motion.
no,
For
there
record,
You asked for
wasn't.
motion, went back, you got it.
Okay, well, I think the first thing that we ought to decide is, are we going to up the revenues to what we consider to be a more realistic projection of what they're going to receive? Since there is an issue with declining revenues, I think it's important to be as realistic in this without overestimating as we can be. I'll take a consensus. Is there a consensus on that? Everybody in favor, please say aye.
Can I make a suggestion?
Oh, yes.
I would move to change the beginning balance to it'll get to 42. Let's go halfway there. It's been a wet spring, who knows, but then this quarter is gonna hold as compared to last year.
And that also changes the projections in the general fund.
Yes, yeah, it would be, well, yeah, we'll take note of that, that we're gonna increase the overall fund if we did it, whatever it is you decide.
So 38,500.
38,500.
I'll second
That's what I
that.
would move.
It's been moved and seconded that we increase the revenues in this department to 38,500.
Madam Chair, could I amend my motion?
Yes.
And to increase the contingency back to an additional $4,000, which would be $79,30 for the offset expense.
Okay, that's still 10%, so that's okay. Yep.
Is that acceptable to the second?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor to increase the revenues, which will mean also increasing the revenues in the general fund by the same percent, or not the same percentage, but their share of that projection to $38,500, and that is to show up as a debit in the contingency, which brings the contingency back up from $39,30 to $79,30. Is there a second? There's been a second and a first. Everybody in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, that passes. Kevin?
I would make a second motion that the following expenses be transferred to the general fund. Under expenses, personal expense, the entire amount for $3,365. Under materials and services, contract and service miscellaneous, landscape, flower maintenance, citywide garage sale, plant and supplies.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that first.
What page you looking at, Kevin?
Page 23. Two-thirds of the way down, contract services.
That was a motion?
What about the attorney?
I believe the attorney thing is gonna have to be addressed by council because it's a policy issue as far as the split.
I think we should make a recommendation. We can do that
What
after
about the
this.
utilities? Should they be paying utilities? It's the fourth one down.
I don't think they should be. They could have their meetings somewhere else.
Well, under utilities, it says light signage and
Oh.
east entry
Well, but still,
and
that's just,
web hosting.
that's just to be paid by the 70%.
Why should they have to pay for that light? That never did make sense to me.
Can I answer that?
Yeah, Darlene.
When I was on tourism, we put a light over that sign because it was dark. And I think at that time, then we were to pay the utilities and the cost of lighting up that sign. But I would also suggest that we take that out and move that. And I had a question still on the, Kevin, you said to take out the city garage sale expense? Is that the advertising that you put out to bring the people in,
Yeah,
right?
it
So
I don't agree with
I
that.
think we should leave that one in.
Yeah.
That's what, you put it in the paper and things like that, and it brings quite a few people to town, so I think we need to.
Wouldn't that just go under
Yeah.
events or advertising or any other?
That's not the income.
Why does it need a whole line item?
Because we were trying to track what the expenses were versus the revenue, is all I'm trying to do. To see whether the garage sale, I mean, if it gets all combined, then it just, they're trying this for the first year, well, actually, it'd be the second year now, and I was just trying to track it a little bit easier for them. It's up to you, but
How could you recognize revenue from this particular item?
garage sale,
Yeah, how could you
people
recognize?
pay for their $5 to get in the newspaper.
And the tourism department's the one that does that? You go out and collect?
No, they come and bring it into the city.
This was our first year.
Yeah,
The
this was our
businesses-
first year.
There's revenue there of $150, Kevin.
That's
Yeah,
expended.
I get that. I don't see how that's tourism.
Tourism voted to take that over from the business association.
You were given it.
And it does
Okay,
bring
however.
people to town for one day. Was there, George?
I have a question, and it's just, and I don't know, but it seems like to me that what Kevin started to say as far as the landscaping expense, the contract to do that, and maybe the expense to do the garage sale, that, can we have another line item, another budget fund for city beautification and maintenance?
We can create a
And
new fund.
Well, I guess what I'm asking is, can we create this new fund and it still be the responsibility of the tourism committee to manage it?
That would be up to the council to decide that issue.
Okay.
Kevin?
So,
Maybe
Kevin?
Rich could help me on this. Wouldn't the simplest way be to transfer these expenses back into the general fund for right now until we address adopting a new fund, or would it be easier to create a new fund right now and transfer these expenses into it, or?
Well, if you have existing line items, let's say the attorney, you want to move that to the general fund, all you do is zero out this one here, and we add it back to the line item there.
We were gonna leave that.
The attorney?
Yeah, it was the contract service.
Until there was a discussion about how the city's attorney expenses are divided. That will be a council discussion.
Well, anyway, if you want to zero out anything on here that's, you think is a
The
general
$350
fund item, we'll move it to the general fund.
for utilities, the $7,000 for landscaping, flower maintenance, the $800 for plants and supplies, and the $3,365 for personnel expenses.
And there was also the service, contract service miscellaneous. Kind of had on there too.
Well, the
Yeah.
personnel is,
I didn't say that.
that's just an hourly wage we pay people.
I also think the audit should be removed personally.
No, they pay for their own.
Okay, they pay for their own audit. Is that an appropriate amount, Marianne, for the, do you think that is how much it costs to audit the tourism?
It's cost the city $22,000 to audit.
To audit the, okay. Kevin?
So then the audit is split because I heard you say, I thought I heard you say earlier that because this fund has its own separate audit, that they didn't pay a split of the
No,
attorney's
they have
fees?
their separate fund, which has to be audited. It's not a separate,
It's a citywide audit.
it's a citywide audit.
Okay. So they're just paying a split of the total citywide audit?
They're paying a percentage, and again, if council was to change that percentage, then they sure can.
I believe that should be offset by the 70%, which is meant to offset the cost of tourism. I don't think they should be charged for direct costs like that. That's my feeling personally. I think that should be included in our list. Don?
Could I just get again what we have on the floor now to
You
remove?
have on the floor a motion to remove from expenses $350 for utilities, $7,000 for landscaping, blah, 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 $800 for plants and materials, $3,365 for personnel. Is that correct?
Did you, and then he changed it, right, didn't you?
Yeah, I didn't say anything about, I'll just withdraw my motion and we can restate it.
Okay, that
Before,
would be easier. Tiffany?
before we do, I think Darlene had her hand up
Oh,
first.
I'm sorry, Darlene.
I wanted to ask Donna, does tourism still, would they want to do the flowers or oversee the planting of the flowers? And wouldn't it be easier to just oversee it and send the check to the general fund? And could that be done? Or who else is going to oversee the flowers?
That's another fund. Kevin?
It is the Tourism and Beautification Committee, but this is the tourism fund. It's got nothing to do with the committee. This is where the tourism money, this is where they get their revenue for their tourism portion of the committee. The beautification part of it can come from the general fund, can come from a separate beautification fund or whatever, but
So they can still do the flowers
sure,
and
it's
then the
still
check?
part of their authority or responsibility or
just-
whatever.
It's just
General
like the
fund,
public
but-
works guys does streets and sewer and, you know.
I didn't know if tourism would continue.
Tiffany?
So, for the contract service, miscellaneous, what all does that cover?
Yeah, what is that?
What is that, Mary Ann? That's part of the copier service contract, the computer software service, is that what that has to do with? What does that have to do with?
Right off the top of my head, I have to.
Contract service, what does that cover, Donna?
I think that covers like if we do a contract with somebody, like,
What, Kevin and Eve?
like for the website or,
That'd be marketing.
That would be marketing. No, this is miscellaneous.
Well, back here,
contract
it
service.
says, back here on page 4 of the, just before the very last pages there, contract service covers postage, printing newsletters, bank fees, covers all of these different things, so they're covering a portion of these costs. It's page 4 of these little charts in the back of the very, before the very last one.
So is this a matrix, like, or what was that word we used last time? Same excellent.
Yeah. So it's number 4, it has a 4 down on the bottom, and that's the one for the contract service. So these are all the
But
things
they're
that.
not charged all of that,
No, but, okay. So
because they have their own postage line item.
Yeah, look for Fund 8 in the left-hand column. I don't see that Fund 8 is any of those.
Okay, well, then, what, I mean,
I'm just looking.
I know, I understand that, but that's contract service miscellaneous. It says, why do they, if they're not paying it, then why is it there? I mean,
For a what if they have a contract that they are wanting to do.
Well,
that's
they
not what-
have,
but that's
they
not what
have
this-
it here.
but that's not what this thing says. This,
What they used on, back in 09-10, I would have to look and see.
It says here on
They haven't used
page
any
4.
through 1/31, 2011.
okay.
I mean, it was 08 or
Okay,
09.
so that's not $1,000 that is absorbed by another department or anything, or a direct charge from the city to the tourism department,
No. It stays in the fund.
like the audit is.
It stays in the fund and rolls over.
Okay. Donna, do you have any more comments? Anybody? Don, or do you have, is your hand up?
No, I'm just holding my pen
Darlene?
in case I want to rise.
There's two contract services, contract services miscellaneous and contract services miscellaneous, and it says landscape flower maintenance. There's two of those. Now, when I was on tourism and we had contract services, it was irrigating and constructing the retaining walls and landscape designers and people that we hired to do work for tourism. Does that make sense to you?
I don't see why we had two contract
I don't
service
either.
miscellaneous
It
lines.
looks like that contract service has something to do with the audit and the attorney and the city. Because it's up there.
I would like to see the $1,000 added to the $7,000 contract service miscellaneous.
Why?
Oh,
I'm sorry,
well, okay, then that's all that we would, if we take that away, the landscaping, flower, and maintenance, that would be the only contract service left, is the $1,000, correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
Miscellaneous.
Yeah.
And so the total of, what figures are we looking at? Are we having them pay for their own audit stuff? Everybody?
What they pay for?
Guida?
Well, you know, I was wondering, ours is separate, how many others, are being audited, separate departments, et cetera, and what percentage are we paying of that?
Well,
Paying 1.5.
every fund is audited
Right.
individually in terms of percentage. The thing with percentages is,
Well,
I don't think I know the answer, I don't think Marion knows the answer. We would need to go back and look at these indirect billings in terms of what was actually going on in all cases, historically. if we wanted to come up with a new set of percentages, in other words, the attorney fee, where was that actually going, and what funds were, were absorbing, charging the money?
I'd like to, see that we're paying for the time spent on that, but not necessarily to others.
That's
No, I understand.
not as important as the contract service attorney to understand that, because that expense can go through the sky if the city has high legal expenses. So, should we restate that motion, Donna?
My only other question was about paying for Betty to film that. That's really not a tourism.
That's been
thing.
removed.
Oh, has it?
It's not been removed, it's was
Oh,
in
okay, the personnel.
the motion that was removed, so we're back at ground zero.
Okay.
But I assume that that entire personnel expense was in Kevin's original motion. I assume it will be again.
I have a question.
Rich?
Under here, the only personnel expense in here is tied to extra labor. Do you have some people working hourly?
We pay for the summer worker that the city hires
And
to water our flowers.
Okay, so that's a legitimate expense?
Yes,
Well,
it is.
it's expense that goes along with the flowers and
But it's tied to the person who has to be paid.
The beautification portion of the
Yeah.
committee.
All right.
Which
So-
will disappear.
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure that it was a real expense, no matter where it should end up.
Laura?
I have a question as far as the contract services for the audit. Does each department then, besides the overall, you said they do overall, and then tourism has its own individual, and that's what
No.
it charges against?
Each
Or-
fund,
Each fund has each fund is audited.
so the street fund is audited, water is audited, sewer is audited, general fund is audited, tourism is audited. The only real question is, how much of that person's time as an auditor is actually spent looking at tourism? Off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you that, but but each fund that gets audited contributes to the audit.
Therefore, each fund, not only tourism, has incurred the fee of
Right,
this sort.
right.
It's not just this.
It shows up in every fund.
Okay, Kevin?
Personally, I don't have any problem with the audit,
Okay.
them paying $625. I think it's an appropriate expense personally.
Uh,
They're
there-
auditing this particular fund. I think that's a reasonable expectation that
Donna, I would like to ask you, are there any other expenses here other than the ones that we have withdrawn, which is the $3,365 for personnel, $350 for utilities, $7,000 for contract service, landscaping and maintenance, and $800 for plant and supplies? Are there any other areas that concern you that you feel need to be removed from this committee?
I don't think so. I think
Financial responsibility?
that sounds,
Darlene,
You missed the 1,000 from the other contract service miscellaneous.
I don't think we decided to remove that. It doesn't get used, so my understanding is. Laura?
Okay, so we're removing all the total personnel expense?
No, we're transferring them to either a new fund or back to the general fund.
Yeah.
Laura?
Do all departments, isn't this how they show what administrative costs go to each fund? So are we gonna change each fund, or?
Whenever you make a change to one fund, as Mary Ann will attest, that's why she's looking so depressed.
I'm keeping it in here, okay?
It causes changes to multiple other funds.
So, but my question is, this is personnel costs from administration, so to speak?
No, this is personnel costs from a watering boy who waters flowers, or a watering girl, or a watering
Slide 21.
person.
Yeah.
well, actually, no.
It's a Fund 21.
It says
But-
Fund 21.
It does, and that was an error when I set up the coding, okay? But I can't change that, okay? So it's not part of the admin, it's just, it was coded wrong.
Will you find
Back to
these?
fund- We'll send it back to Fund 21.
Who's it gonna get expended to?
Yes.
Probably property.
Which is part of the
So,
general.
right
Which is part
now,
of the general fund, which is 1/4.
we'll just send it back to, and then we'll decide when we get to the general fund whether we make a new fund or not. Don? Oh, Rich. Oh, Rich, I'm sorry.
Well, don't, yeah, let's still make a new fund. I mean, since we got the 30-70 split, it's either gonna be in tourism or the general fund. The question is, inside of general fund, where's it go? And like she said, it probably could go to the subset property of the general fund. So I don't think we need to, the only thing you might do is create a new line item within, say, property within the general fund.
Kevin?
And we can address that. One thing that, basically what we're doing is removing beautification expenses out of this particular tourism fund. So I guess we can decide later whether we do need a beautification fund where we can see what we're actually spending on that particular project. And so these folks don't have an idea of where they're at as far as the expenditures they're making, what they have available.
I think that it's essential that in order to track it, that we have that kind of a fund. And also Darlene mentioned that, and if anybody would think about it, look around our city, and the things that have happened that have improved the appearance of our city have all happened out of the tourism fund as far as capital improvements. There was the Overlook Park, largely financed by the tourism department, all the improvements of the rock and the flowers in the mall, the entrance gateway over here, that was all fun, and the way that was done is that was saved for. And that would, to me, fall under the beautification end of this committee. And I'd like to see eventually, not that we can afford it this year, I'm sure we can't, but eventually I would like to see more money in there than just for the flowers. It would be nice to put more money in there so the committee could accumulate it and have another capital project. It's the only place that a beautification capital project has come from. So I hate to see, that potential of ever having there be another one be totally gone. And so eventually, I think it would be nice to give that fund more money than what we're talking about here.
John and Rich both have there.
The way I look at it now, we're moving money out of tourism, but we're still working with 100% of the 8% we're collecting. And I would like to see, even though we're moving it out of here, I'd like a way to track it, to understand where it's
creating
going
another
eventually.
Sure.
I don't think we have to do it right now, but I would like to know where it's going.
You would keep the same line item,
Yeah.
you would just move to the general
Move
fund.
it to another, we would have to
And you could
create.
use the exact
I
same
don't
name.
agree with that. I don't think it should be moved to the general fund. I think it should be moved
Like
to
to
a
identify
new
it.
beautification fund.
Well, then tourism money will have to be, then the revenue that comes in will have to be paid into
No.
refunds.
No, it won't. That fund could be
Comes out of the general
financed
fund.
by the general fund. It won't
I'd
be
like to see.
financed by tourism.
That's what I'd
That's
like.
why we're removing it.
Okay, what I was saying was, that since the money only goes to tourism fund and general fund, you set up a line item here in the general fund, say in property, where you track the exact same dollars, but the money comes from general fund. You don't create a new fund. You've got kind of,
Well, then you just put 30% in the tourism, 70%, and say 15% in beautification. And, just,
that's fine.
George?
I think what he's trying to say is under, if he put it into the parks, that there would be a line item under parks that would say beautification plants. So it would be a complete another subsection of the parks, so that they could track it immediately, but yet it's still in the general fund.
Well,
see what I'm saying?
I don't see the difference whether you're going to finance with revenue a new fund that has that available. To me, it's a lot cleaner just to have that money designated to a fund that is solely for beautification. And these line items, and then the revenue source would be a percentage or part of the 70% that the general fund gets. But like Kevin says, we probably don't have to have this discussion right now. We could have this discussion later. The main thing we want to do now is to get
Okay.
this fund approved. So, would you like to put that in the form of a motion? Because after that, we have to budget for this extra money. Kevin, do you have a new motion for me?
I've got it written down.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I'll make a motion that we will remove from the tourism fund the personnel expenses in the amount of $3,365, the utilities in the amount of $350, contract services miscellaneous landscape / flower maintenance $7,000, and plants / supplies for $800.
For a
Can
total
you read it
of,
just one more time?
One more time.
Thank you. Slower.
Personnel expenses in the amount of $3,365, utilities in the amount of $350, contract services miscellaneous having to do with landscape / flower maintenance in the amount of $7,000, plants / supplies in the amount of $800.
could we,
I'll second that.
okay. Question, could we add to that motion, and put the total of the amount of of what we're taking out, which is $11,515, I think?
Yes, it is. Oh, a third opinion here with George in just a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got 3 people that agree. That's amazing, okay.
So someone needs to make a friendly amendment.
Friendly, for a total of $11,515.
Right.
I have a motion on the floor to remove I'm not sure what order, the personnel expenses for $3,365, contract service miscellaneous, plants and maintenance, $7,000, plants and supply, $800, and utilities for $350, totaling $11,515 to move these to an undetermined place, back to the general fund for now. I guess that wasn't part of the motion, wasn't it? Just to take it away, right?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. For a total of $11,515. Everybody in favor, please say aye.
Discussion? Oh, discussion?
Discussion. I thought that's what we did.
Well, you made a motion.
Okay.
I should have,
No, I was repeating the motion.
oh, okay.
It had already been made and seconded. But a question,
Okay,
if you have a
I
question.
wanted- I just wanted to ask a question.
Okay.
I'm not in favor of doing that, and the reason for that is, it's not that I don't think tourism needs the money, and it's not that I don't think tourism is beat up for lots of years over their money. But I have a real big issue with the debt we have, and that's my biggest issue, is the debt. Tourism's done a great job, and obviously the general fund's getting a lot of money, and it grows every year because of the efforts of tourism. So we appreciate what tourism has done. But for me, I want that $11,000 up because that $11,000 is coming out of the general fund. General fund's gonna pay for that. Well, either the 70% that tourism puts into it, or whatever it is, the general fund's paying for it. And personally, I want that $11,000 to go towards the debt. We got a debt that we haven't even tried. We haven't made an effort to pay on for a couple of years. We need to start making an effort, and my belief is, don't like to do that to tourism, I appreciate what they've done, but I believe right now that the debt we have, we're gonna have to squeeze out every nickel out of the general fund. The general fund doesn't have a whole lot going on in it, but as far as I'm concerned, we need to squeeze out every nickel out we can to head towards that.
Darlene?
And including not taking the $11,000 more, or putting more of $11,000 more debt on it. Anyway, that's where I'm at.
Tom, I think what they're just discussing is taking the items out of here that don't comply with the ORS of tourism expenditures. So they're trying to make it comply legally with the ORS.
Well, I'm not sure whether complies or not complies. I know that in the past, we've had a discussion on what complies, and in the ORS, there was there was a percentage of what you did in the past and what you did now, and there's a certain percentage you can pay, so as far as I know, we're compliant. Anyway, that's where I'm at on it.
I don't know if it's our position to decide whether this fund is compliant when it covers expenses like this. It seems to me like that's a legal issue between the city council and the lawyer. It seems like it's out of our jurisdiction, but in fact, we all do know that the normal split is 70-30 in the other direction. And I'll answer your question as soon as I'm done speaking, Shauna. If you'd put your hand down, I'd appreciate it. It distracts me, please.
Don't want to forget.
Okay, thank you. I won't forget. The normal split is opposite. It is 70-30, and that's going to be changed, or at least I guess there's legislation intending that to be changed to 50-50. But whichever way you look at it, our tourism for marketing gets less than it is intended by statute to get, whether it's due to being grandfathered in or whatever. And I was not on the tourism committee, but I was a citizen when the city first came to the tourism committee, and the public works representative at the time stood in front of the tourism committee and said, here's how much you're going to pay now for flowers, etc. And it was considerably more than they'd ever done before when I was on the tourism committee. When I was on the tourism committee, and Darlene can speak for this, I don't know, because we were on the tourism committee at the same time, but she was a lot more engaged than I were. I believe that we contracted out to have the flowers done, etc. But our last city administrator wanted to take care of all of that and then just charge the tourism committee. And that's when this whole thing, I believe, came out of hand. So I would like to undo some of the damage that has been done over the years by coming and requiring more and more of the tourism's money to do what I would consider to be the city's job. So that's my comment. Laura? Shauna, I'm sorry, Shauna first. Okay.
Bernard Seeger actually covered that last year, the legality of the ORS and use of those funds, and that was completely legal. He outlined that very well last year. I too am opposed to the change to the budget for tourism, proposed budget. If we're going to do a vote, I would vote.
Okay. Laura?
I understand where you're all coming from. I feel, the debt is my main total issue on that. But however, I don't want to say that I want one department to conform to Oregon law and others not to. So if this is what's going to make this fund correct, then I want us to do that for all of our funding, consistently throughout our policies. So as much as I don't like it, I would go for it, even though it's not my intent to have the general fund be responsible for these things with the people. But for law, I would go that way.
Darlene?
I don't know that Bernard Seeger is an attorney that could come up with that decision if it was compliant or not. And I think what he spoke at was like wasn't it 12% he said had to be spent on tourism related?
That's right.
Yeah. And so, and that is the intention, is to go through each fund and have them comply. And I think, we're on tourism right now, and we have the ability to make it comply, so I think that's what we need to do.
And whose authority are we basing it on? Is it in writing? It'd be nice to have an authority that we can.
We have a clearly stated ORS that says what the
And
expenditure is.
that's what we can refer to, that's what I'm asking. That's the authority then.
Rich?
If if you're gonna do a revote, I was gonna ask the Councilor Pruitt if she would do an
We haven't
amendment.
voted yet.
There was no vote yet.
We've only had
Oh,
a first and a
okay.
second.
The-
I'm only trying to read it, and so we can have a
Okay.
vote.
If you added 4,000 to the revenue, you deducted 11,515 from the expenditures, so that leaves a hole of 15,515 that you could, I think you should probably move into contingency to balance to balance the first two.
We already moved the 4,000 into contingency.
Yes, I understand that. I'm just saying you should maybe do a separate vote on having a contingency that is increased by 15,515.
Sandra,
Yes.
can I just speak to, first of all, to the ORS? It is my understanding, as I did a bunch of research, that yes, the percentage that we were spending on beautification when the law came into effect in 2002, we could still continue to spend, but that's not tracked. We have no idea if we're spending that percentage. I've never seen anything that says we spent this much in 2002 on beautification, and every year. Mary Ann, is that something you track? No. So it's very messy, and we have no idea if we're spending more than we're supposed to or we're not. So it does mess with the ORS because we don't know that. I just wanted to say that about.
I wanted to ask her, do you have any ideas of where you want that 11,500 to go to?
That doesn't
or
need to
do
be
you-
in the motion to.
We can do it after.
Okay, all right, well, so let's just.
Okay, let's
can we
finish
vote
the
on this?
motion that we have on the floor. We'll go around and vote individually. Kevin?
Yes.
Donna? Oh, Donna's not on it. Sean? Tom?
No.
And Laura?
Yes.
Darlene? Gaida?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Yes.
Tiffany?
Yes.
And myself, yes also, so the motion carries.
So I have, dissenting votes as Hassel and Granville, correct? Okay.
Sandra, can I just say one more thing?
Yes.
You gotta realize too that if tourism has more money, they spend more money on bringing tourists in, which puts more money into the general fund.
John, is it possible for the tourism committee to have a little spreadsheet where they can track it and just ask Mary Ann on a monthly basis or whatever, quarterly, what have you?
It's being taken out now, so she.
Yeah, now
Well,
it's-
nonetheless, of course, you gotta start somewhere, and if
Yeah.
we're all trying to get it together, maybe
That's
this would
true.
be a way to be responsible.
Okay, so now we need to
Okay.
state where to put that
Now,
$11,115.
we already added $4,000 to the contingency, bringing it back to 79,930. And so now we're going to be adding, it's been suggested that we add the 11,550 to contingency. I personally don't think that we should, because you're not supposed to budget any more than 10% in contingency.
Maybe Donna has some ideas.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't really care where you put it. Just put it in there.
I would suggest maybe marketing.
I would like to see half of it go to tourism events, that category that's under, and the other half go to advertising display fees.
What about 5,000 to one and 6,515 to the other?
Fine.
And where was the 5,000 in?
Marketing?
Marketing?
Into advertising and display fees, and I don't know if it's broken down into that. Yeah, so advertising and display fees, maybe for the 6,000, and then
Okay,
the 5,000
6,550.
into tourism events, seed funds. Because if any of you came to the guitar trio thing that we put on at the port, it was highly successful. And we talked about wanting to do 2 a year instead of just 1.
Sandra?
That's tourism events seed funds?
Yes.
That's
5,000.
5,000. And the other one is contract services?
No,
No,
advertising.
Advertising. And did we already increased that, didn't we?
Yeah,
Yes, you did.
$4,000, we already increased that $4,000.
To 23,618? And so now it would be increased to add 6,615,
515.
Should we put that-
6515.
I mean 515, right. So that brings it up to $30,000.
I have a question over here.
Maybe we should,
Oh.
special promotion.
Yes.
John, do you foresee any expenses in capital outlays to increase that at all this year?
You know, we have talked about buying, well, that goes back to that, I mean, new pots for the flowers downtown, so.
Or you have Christmas decorations here, malls, and there's different things, I don't know if you want to.
And also bicycle racks.
We talked about
Yes, we
bicycle
talked
racks because of the
about
tourists coming through with their bicycles, so. we
So
could
this
do
might
that.
be the time if you wanted to add some of this back.
Richard?
Just to make it easier, I mean, why don't you put it into the categories that you stated right now, and then you can go back to the tourism committee and talk about the changes that are occurring and where you as a committee really want to spend the money, and bring that back either to the council or to the committee.
Well, as long as you're clear that materials and services, all stay materials and services, you can't take that out to put capital outlay. And so if there's nothing put into capital outlay, then you can't take it out of something and get you.
Right, so if she discusses and brings them back, then we can.
Yeah, one of the biggest events we have all year is the fireworks display. I wonder if anybody's interested in maybe supporting that a little bit more, because, I mean, we packed the city for that. Whether part of that 11,000, we might want to use it there, or, I mean, I guess they still could, you still could transfer it there,
Yeah.
the same category items, but maybe that is part of your discussion.
Well, one of the things that we talked about was the fact that we already packed the city for the fireworks display, so do we need to draw more people on that day?
I think supporting the event,
Which we do with
Which we
$5,000.
which,
Yeah.
which hasn't really changed in the last several years, I mean, inflation and stuff, I mean, is the display gonna get smaller and smaller with inflation, because we don't keep supporting?
It was $4,000 in 8-9, and raised to $5,000 for 9, 10, 10, 11.
That's a very good point, though, is they can buy less because they cost more.
Sure.
To show them. Oh, yeah. Okay.
So are we going to pass this tonight, or is there a suggestion that you come back, or?
I would love to come back if that works.
Did we have a motion on changing?
No, you just had discussion on the adding it back.
Okay, so,
Well, I was just gonna say, you've eliminated personnel category. Everything is in M&S. I think the real question for you is, do you really want something in capital outlay? Because that's a separate category. And that's, inside of the M&S, we can move stuff around later on after the budget's approved, and the council can without a lot of problems. But you really need to know if you want something in capital outlay. That's what you should be talking to your committee about.
Okay.
5,000.
Well, we did put 5,000, didn't we? No, we didn't.
5,000 in tourism,
5,000 in tourism events,
and then we put the other 6,515
contract,
in
and advertising, display, and fees.
So, they'll figure that out. I think they should bring it back.
Yeah, I just hate not to finish something totally, but we don't approve everything totally anyway at this point anyway.
So, Sandra, just to be clear for the record, that's gonna go back to tourism committee before you finish the.
Well, when isn't it your next tourism committee meeting?
It's the first Monday in June.
That's not gonna work for us, really. We can't keep everything until the end, I believe.
Okay.
But we can put it someplace where you can make changes, Kevin.
So instead of putting this 61, or 6515 into
Advertising.
advertising, how about we put the 6515 into the capital outlay category, and there, I mean, you're not gonna spend all this money anyway.
No.
At least it gives you a placeholder for capital outlay, so.
And if the tourism committee has a comment on it, just send us an email, or a letter I can hand to them.
So that would make that,
Oh, okay.
Look at all those changes.
So that's where the 6,515 will go?
Public hearing, just say, this is what we really want.
Okay.
That way it doesn't.
and which,
Do we have to put it in a line item?
does it need a line item?
I was just gonna put it in flour, barrels, garbage cans, and,
Okay.
Name
because,
some things,
Yeah,
so.
that's fine.
I mean,
You can move it
You can
around.
move it around.
in the category, you're okay, so.
How about miscellaneous?
I have to add
Okay, do I have a consensus that, to accept this with those changes made, and the suggestion is to add, there's $11,515, to add $5,000 to tourism events, and to add $6,515 to the capital outlays. Everybody in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Everybody opposed? Okay, noted. Tom is opposed. And I imagine Shauna is also.
She knows she is. So that was just consensus, right?
Yes.
Right, that was just a consensus. And so now I would like to take a consensus to, unless there's any more discussion on this fund?
Yes, there's still the question about whether or not all the money's gonna go into tourism and then be funded out.
Well, I don't think we know that yet. We're still getting information on that.
Right. So, but I need to finalize the budget if that's.
Okay, but when we finalize it, it's not final.
Okay.
We're finalizing our tentative decision, I guess you could
There's
say,
also gonna be a final public hearing before the council on this.
before we make our
Before
final
they make the
decision.
final decision on the budget.
And then one at the council as well. There'll be 2 more opportunities for public input before we finalize everything. After going over each individual fund, we'll come back and finalize it as a whole. And before then, there'll be an opportunity for citizen input, and then again at the council hearing, there'll be another opportunity. Which time the council can undo a lot of the things we've done here, if they want to. And it's my understanding, we do not make a recommendation we can make recommendations to the council, but our passing a budget is not a recommendation. We are passing the budget, and the council then can change the budget that we have passed up to a certain level. Oops. And then, they are the ones to, what's the word, adopt the budget. So we initially pass it, they can change it. Okay, so now I'd like to take a consensus to accept this as it is with the changes made.
We just did that.
Tentatively. Okay, we did that? Did everybody say yes? Because I totally don't remember doing that. Did we do that? Jeez. Look at it, it's almost 9 o'clock.
Actually, Sandra, we're at the next budget meeting, the weeks are going by.
Really, would be surprised. So, let's look at our agenda. What else do we have to do tonight? It's almost 9 o'clock and we haven't had a break, so I don't imagine we can be. Oh, yeah. The health insurance. Mary Ann, I did want to tell you that I appreciated the input that you had on the health insurance. That was nice to see that you made that effort, and I appreciate it. And for everybody out there that doesn't know, Mary Ann has brought back a suggestion on how the employees can help a bit with the employee insurance. But I don't think we should have that discussion tonight since it's almost 9 o'clock. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
To continue until
To
May
continue
18th.
until the correct date, May 18th.
Are we gonna set the itinerary for the next
Yes.
agenda first?
Yes. We'll do streets, water, sewer,
Healthcare.
Healthcare.
healthcare, and should we add something to that, or we're pretty slow? Does it, any suggestions, Kevin?
You wanna add city life?
I think maybe that's a bit big. Is there something simpler we can add?
Police?
That's in.
Oh, that's general.
That's in the general fund.
Okay. I just
Well, we'll finish our discussion on loans, there'll be more on that probably, do you think, or is that not until after council action? The recommendation was that council act in regard to the loans, correct?
Right.
Okay. Were there any other recommendations, Sue, do you remember that we made tonight that go to council other than that one?
Look at the spreads,
I beg your pardon?
they were gonna look at the spreads. At the spread.
Oh, the basic
Attorney spread,
Yeah,
I think is what
What's in the back of the book? So,
that's there, isn't it?
What? Yes, Kevin?
I believe there was direction on the 494, 670 debit that's in the fire station,
Oh, yes.
that we were gonna find out what and why and
Yes.
what's going on.
Yep, we're gonna work on that.
Okay,
Okay,
I just wanna make sure.
okay. Now, could I have a motion to adjourn?
No?
No?
Did we add,
No,
To
we
extend.
continue it
To
though.
extend.
Oh, continue.
what did we decide to add?
We didn't decide to add anything.
We're going to do
Sweet.
streets, water,
And
sewer,
healthcare,
In health.
We're
healthcare.
gonna have health
loans,
insurance,
if there's any left.
probably have the loans discussion again.
Yeah.
loans and-
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Kevin made a motion to adjourn, does anybody? Sean? To continue.
Continue, 30%,
Need a second.
70%.
In favor?
Aye.
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 Is that aye?
80,000.